Okay, so today I decided to try a different technique on setting up the AW4416 to act as a multiband compressor. What I've done is I basically decided to just copy and paste the stereo file that I'm using onto one track this time, and then, on the suggestion of some other of the guys on the forum here, instead of copy and pasting to each individual recording track, I just ran an output from the auxiliary outs into the input. But instead of going the route of using an omni analog output to the analog input, I instead set the system up to run from the stereo outs, the digital stereo outs I should say, to the digital stereo input. And I'll show you here in just a moment how I set that up. Now the track that I'm using, it's another track from my demo CDs that I put together for the theatrical rock opera, basically a dark rock opera, a number of years ago. At this time, I actually had accrued more equipment for recording. I'm still using my Tascam 424 Mark III cassette recorder to do the preliminary recordings. But this time I've acquired more microphones to set up on the drum kit, and I mic'd everything close mic with drum clips on the mic, or drum mic clips on the drums, only set up a couple inches away from the heads, and ran those all through the mixers, a flat EQ, set their levels onto one track, and then gave everything the same EQ to match up with what the actual instrumental tracks that were had at the time, which were, of course, the guitars and the bass. At this point, with the extra microphones and a little more time and experience of actually miking up and recording live drums with the system that I had and how I was EQing it, I was much happier with the results that I got off of it. I was using DBX Type 2 noise reduction on the system, which acts as a compander, a compression and expanding unit. So that was the only compression and dynamics control that I had on anything at that time. I ran outputs for effects, like on the drums for reverbs, into the AW4416 and set those up with a high pass filter so that only the higher frequencies that registered from the snare would come through, and that way I can try and keep the low registers from the bass drum from kind of overpowering everything. But as I recorded it, everything actually came out really well, except there was one spot at which I was playing the kick drum harder when I punched in on the drums to fix something. And it kind of messes around with the compressor you might use on our master channel, and plus it's just noticeably louder. So at this point, I can use this kind of a track to demonstrate just how multiband compression is really supposed to be set up. I'm still not very adept at using a multiband compression system, but this is a much better example for how they're supposed to be used as opposed to the last one I gave. So let me go ahead and show you how I've set this thing up in a moment. So as you can see on the track screen, I've just got the stereo master track set up on tracks 1 and 2, and that's it. The rest of it is through routing in the digital in and out systems and the internal routing patches that the AW4416 is set up to be able to do. Back here, not sure how well it can be seen. Let's see if I can. These here are the digital in, stereo out, digital stereo in, and I've just used a single cable to connect them. And by default, they are set up to actually run under, well, this digital stereo out will give you the same thing as the actual stereo outs of your track. So what we want to do is we want to set that up so it doesn't cause any feedback in the system. So first thing, of course, is you go over into your scenes and reset everything to 0 so that there are no issues with feedback coming through the loop out of anything. Then you want to go into setup, and under setup you have your inputs, you have your effects patch bay, returns, and recorder input assignment. At the moment though, we're going to go to patch out right here. That's going to give us this page. You got your Omni outs set up for auxiliary 1, 2, 3, and 4. Your stereo out is already assigned to the stereo left and right, just like your standard analog stereo out. I'm not set up with these slots for outputs. I've got inputs set up in these, so these won't do me any good. So right here, I'm just going to go and set it up under auxiliary 1 and 2. Just turn the jog shuttle, that guy there, to change that once it's highlighted. Okay, then we're going to go back into patch in, and we go up here. There's my cursor, and we set these to be digital left, whoops, there we go, and digital right. And you just do the same thing all the way down. Again, I took 4 bands out of this one, 4 stereo bands. Okay, so then you have your input section here, and you just want to set them all up so that they're chained together. Now you can actually go under one of these settings here. I believe it's under the pan setting. I might be wrong though. No, there it is. You get pair channel. You want to push that tab. And then on your inputs, you can just come right up here and you can pair these together. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then on your outputs and your record channels, you can quickly pair this up. You don't have to do it that way. You can just push these 2 buttons simultaneously and it'll come up with the same thing asking if you want to pair them together. And you just tell it yes. Okay, now the next step is setting up your auxiliary buses. So we went to pair bus, and we got auxiliary out and bus out, and we want to pair 1 and 2. So that way it plays the track in stereo through the stereo outputs with just the control of one fader right here, either one, with auxiliary 1 set up. So that'll give us control of both auxiliary 1 and 2 channels without having to switch between those 2 banks. So the next thing to do is set up your levels on your inputs. Going under the monitor channel, I have it set right at 0 dB. If we go up to the view screen and check it out here, I got it set at 0 dB for the channel, and then I've got my auxiliary outs pushed all the way up to 0 dB, and I have them on post at the moment anyway. They don't have to be, but you can do it this way, or you can turn them on to pre's. The stereo output itself has been turned off so that there's no problem with any kind of phasing from the duplicate channels trying to play at the same time. And with that put out, I went back into the inputs right here, 1 through 16. And I ended up setting them all at -10 dB, because with all 8 channels running at -10 dB, the combined overall output was about the same as the standard stereo master file that I've uploaded onto tracks 1 and 2. And at this point, we start our process. So playing the track back, I figured, well, how do I set it all up? How do I set it up so it actually sounds good, or even reasonably close to how it originally sounded, and still get the compression I needed on the certain ranges? So I went over into the EQ, and under our first channel, I ended up setting it up at -21 Hertz to 187 Hertz. And then when I crossed over to the next band, it actually was 125 to 133. This intersection here, where the two channels mix, helped give me a little more boost out of the bass that I lost when I originally did the setup for this particular band. So doing that, crossing them over, having them mix together a little bit, helped it sound just a little bit fuller. And then under the third band, I set it up to go from 1K all the way up to 12.6K. Again, the last band on the fourth band actually is at 10K all the way to 20.1K. So band 3 and band 4 I actually overlapped again, and it was just to give a little bit more clarity to the mix. Now if we go under to the dynamics section, I ended up giving the track, well, this is just a bass track, first band, threshold -8 with a ratio of 4, release of 64 milliseconds and a knee of 1. Second band got a threshold of a -10, attack at 8 milliseconds, a release of 12 milliseconds with a compression ratio of infinity to 1 and a knee of 1. And the third band is set at -3 dB, attack of 6 milliseconds with a release of 12 milliseconds, compression ratio of 3 to 1 and a knee of 1. And then the fourth band, which affects everything on the high registers, has a threshold of -24 dB, which is about where it started to actually show that it was being acted upon by the signal. Attack of 3 milliseconds, an infinite compression ratio, a release of 6 milliseconds, with an output gain of +8 and a knee of 1. Now the reason why I pushed +8 up on that as opposed to the others was to actually bring that level out some, so that there was some more high end. You can hear the cymbals and there was no issue with anything. It actually is an example of dynamic equalization like I had on my previous example. But on this particular demo, I'm using this stuff much more subtly. So now, let me set things up so I can show you what the track originally sounded like, and then you can compare how they sound with this the differing compression settings I used in this multi-band system. Okay, so here we are. I've got it all set up with my multi-band compression settings. Again, like I've shown, I have EQ settings of 21 to 187 on the first band, 125 to 1.33 kilohertz on the second band, 1 kilohertz to 12.6 kilohertz on the third band, and 10 kilohertz to 20.1 kilohertz on the fourth band. And the reason why they overlap is simply because the slight overlap actually was improving the sound a bit in this case, since the frequencies weren't being lost. Dynamic settings, again, that's for the fourth band, that's for the third band, that's for the second band, and that's for the first band. Also, I put in a master overall compression for this track, and that's for the stereo channel. Now if we go to home, under the main inputs, channels 1 through 16, you can see I've got everything set up at negative 10 dB. I'm on post EQ. This will show you what each band looked like post EQ. I'm not sure if it's before or after the compressor. I think it's before. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look. I'll show you how this all operates here. Alright, to solo this out, we still have to turn on channels 1 and 2 on the track recorder side, monitor side, as well as has selected the inputs side. So I'm going to solo out the first individual channels 1 and 2 on the input side, which are set up for my low frequency low pass filter, like that. Give you an idea what it's going to sound like. So now you get to hear a little bit of how the multiband system was set up in this machine here, and what each band was able to do, what frequencies it operated on. And you got to see how it was working a little bit on the touch, not touch screen, but the monitor screen there, so you can get an idea of what the levels looked like and whatnot. But I want to show you exactly what difference was really made by doing this. You know, I mean, in all honesty, I wanted this to be used subtly, just like it was originally intended to be used. Any multiband compression was originally intended to be used. I don't want the listener to notice that something's really been done, and that's the big difference between this demonstration and the previous demonstration I made. The previous demonstration was just to test whether the theories were actually sound and you could actually do it. So in this demonstration, it's to try and hone the technique and the skill a little bit better and see just how far I can take it on my second time around. So at this moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a section of the song that was particularly bad. The part that I'm about to play, this is going to be the original mastered recording, and it's a part where I punched in to do the drum track on the song, and I ended up playing the kick a little harder than I had the rest of the song, and it came out obviously sounding like I was kicking harder and just didn't sound quite like it fit. So it's for things like this that I'm trying to use the multiband compression to help control and eliminate, as a real multiband compression was originally intended to be used for. Here's the original clip. Now, I don't know if you may have been able to notice, but I noticed that right when the double kick style drumming started coming in, the kick was just a little bit stronger, a little bit louder, and it didn't quite blend with the rest of it. And so that's one of the main things I wanted to try and eliminate. Let's go back to that point. Okay, that was the original track. Now here's the multiband compression setup. You were also able to tell that the cymbals were coming out better. They were more crisp to them, and overall level was just a little bit louder possibly than the original. Let's start it back from the beginning so I can give you a better demonstration of that. So anyway, I hope that gives you an idea of how multiband compression is actually supposed to be used and how it works, and how you can set up your digital audio workstation to actually emulate a professionally built either hardware processor or a software processor to plug into one of your software DAWs. Anyway, any questions, just let me know. I'll see what I can do to try and answer anything here or explain anything. Hope it was helpful and informational.